So our factoring note sheet is full of a bunch of stuff. We had greatest common factor, and this is going back. This is stuff that we just tested on here. Factoring trinomials, and in fact, we're going to really focus kind of on this section today when we solve by factoring. Okay, and then we had, some difference of squares, and we will do some of that today also. So if you keep going down, there is some open area down at the bottom. And I'm just going to add a little bit to this instead of doing a whole new sheet. So why don't you guys write this on your sheets that we are going to solve by factoring. And solve being the key word here. We want to get an answer like x equals a number, okay? So before today, it would have been real common for me to give you something like, let's say this. X squared minus 7x plus 12, okay? The only difference is that now I'm going to set that equal to 0. And what we want to do is not just factor, but we're going to actually solve this. Okay, so we're going to solve it, we want to factor this x squared minus 7x plus 12. And so remember when you have a trinomial, we do the two sets of parentheses, right? Yeah, the factoring notion, right? And so we just added this to the bottom. And so we have our two sets of parentheses. We have x and x in our first two spots. And then now we want to do, things that multiply to get 12. So I'll list them over here: 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 4 and 3. And so I have things that multiply to get 12, but now they have to add or subtract to get -7. So that means that here is our winner, right? If it's -4 and -3, that gives us -7. So I'm going to do -4 minus 3. Okay, I'm not quite done yet, but are there any questions on the factoring part so far? Okay, so once we get it factored, here's what we do to actually get an answer. We set this thing equal to 0. So I do x minus 4 equals 0. And we set this thing equal to 0. So x minus 3 equals 0. We set both things equal to 0. Okay, it's called the zero product property. I'll go back in that in just a second, but let me finish it off because we're just one step away. So over here, if I add on the left side, if I add 4 to both sides, x equals +4. And on the right side, if I add 3 to both sides, x equals 3. Those are my two answers. Okay, I kind of said quickly the zero product property. The reason we set this equal to 0 is because if I plug a 4 in for x, 4 minus 4 is 0, of course. And so if that's 0, 0 times anything will be 0. So 0 times anything will be 0. And so if I plug a 4 into there, it works. It makes it equal to 0. Same as if I plug 3 into here. 3 minus 3 is 0. And so, the 3 minus 4 on the left side, -1 times 0 is going to be 0. So it works. So the key is you want to factor it. And that's kind of the hard part, I think. And then you set the two things, this factor equal to 0 and this factor equal to 0 to get 4 and 3. All right, let's try another one. So let's say we have x squared minus 8x minus 20 equals 0. So we want to try and factor this guy, right? So it's a trinomial. Let's do our two sets of parentheses. We've got x and x. And so we want to list factors of 20 that we could add to get -8. So for our factors of 20, I've got 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 4 and 5 gives me 20. I think that's all of them, right? So which ones could give us -8 here? Yeah, 2 and 10, right? So there's our winner if it's +2 and -10. So we have +2 and -10. Okay, so we factored, and I'm just pulling the one up so we can see we factored it. Now we set the left factor equals to x plus 2, equal to 0. And the x minus 10 equal to 0. And so really we could just kind of cut to the chase that x equals -2 and +10. Those are the numbers that would make -2 would make that equal to 0, and +10 would make that equal to 0. So I kind of skipped that one step there, which you guys can do. All right, you with me still? So a couple of variations, okay? Let's say we had x squared minus 6x equals 16. Okay, well, just slightly different than the previous problem is that it's not set equal to 0. So that's the first thing we need to do is just get everything on one side. So I'm going to move that 16 over by subtracting 16 from both sides, giving me x squared minus 6x minus 16 equals 0. So I subtracted 16 from both sides. You just have to get everything on one side. Now it's the same idea, factor that guy. So I have x and x. Factors of 16 might be 1 and 16, 2 and 8, or 4 and 4. Yeah, 2 and 8, so it looks like it's going to be a +2 and a -8, right? For my factor, so that factors into x plus 2 times x minus 8. And now our answers, remember, will be like the opposite of that, or whatever makes it 0. So x equals -2, and then +8 for that guy. All right, let's do one more here. So let's say we have x squared equals 81. All right, there's a few ways you could do this, but remember that what we did in the previous problem was we got everything on one side. So in this problem, I'm gonna move the 81 over to the left by subtracting 81 from both sides. So I get x squared minus 81 is equal to 0. Okay, so I moved it to the left side. Now, remember that difference of squares things? Remember from your quiz, right? Square root of 81 is what? 9, right? So that factors into x plus 9 and x minus 9. Okay, which means our two answers are negative 9 from here and positive 9 from here. So x equals negative 9 and x equals positive 9. We can write them both like that. Okay, so not a far stretch from what we were doing, because the factoring, I think, is the hard part. You want to get everything on one side. Okay, like our first step is we move that 16, got everything on one side. Then you want to factor. And then your answers are kind of the opposite of the numbers that are in the factors. It's whatever makes them equal to 0. Okay, same thing down here. Get everything on one side, so move the 81 over. Then we factor. And then our answer is the opposite of the numbers that are in the factors, or whatever is going to make that equal to 0. All right, we can do this, right? Any questions for me before I shut that off?